All right, let's dive into a massive cosmic puzzle, one that connects everything from distant stars all the way down to the device you're holding in your hand right now.
So we start with a paradox. The universe has this fundamental law that says everything is supposed to get messier and fall apart over time. So how in the world do we get complex, organized things? How can life itself, which is the definition of organized complexity, even exist in the first place? To figure out how order manages to win, we first have to really understand the rule it's constantly fighting against. This is the big challenge for pretty much any system that wants to stick around. And here it is. Let's meet the villain of our story, entropy. You might have heard about it in physics class. It's basically the universe's one-way street toward chaos. It's why your hot coffee gets cold and why buildings, if you leave them alone long enough, will eventually crumble into dust. Yeah, it's that invisible force that guarantees that if you just leave things to themselves, they don't magically get neater, they always get messier. It's just a universal, unavoidable truth. So if everything tends to just fall into disorder, how does a living cell or a city or even a star stay so incredibly organized? Well, the secret, it turns out, is that they don't try to do it all by themselves. Okay, this is the secret sauce right here. If you have a truly closed system, something totally sealed off from the outside world, it's doomed. It will eventually reach maximum entropy, total useless disorder. But the systems we see in the real world, the ones that are organized, they are open systems. They survive because they're constantly interacting with their environment. So what do these open systems use to keep it all together in the face of all that chaos? Well, they have this amazing toolkit with three really critical components. First up is information. Now, this isn't just about data, it's about any signal from the outside world that the system can actually sense and react to. A great way to think about it is as the system's scout, out there gathering intel on what's happening. This quote from Gregory Bateson just nails it. A change in the amount of light is just a physical event, until a plant actually turns its leaves toward it. A drop in temperature is just a number, until your thermostat kicks on the heat. That's when a physical difference becomes truly useful information. But, all that intel from the scout is totally useless without organization. This is the internal structure, the blueprint, if you will, that determines how all the parts are connected and how they function. It's the network that gets the right information to the right place at the right time. And of course, to make any of this actually happen, you need energy. This is the fuel that powers the whole operation. Without a constant flow of energy, the blueprint is just a piece of paper, and the scout can't act on what it finds. Okay, so we've got the toolkit: information, organization, and energy. Now, how do these three things work together to build and maintain order against that constant crushing pressure of entropy? This is where the physicist Erwin Schrödinger had this absolutely brilliant aha moment. He figured out that organized systems don't actually destroy entropy. That's impossible. No, what they do is they import order from their environment, what he called negative entropy, while at the same time exporting their own internal mess back out. Scientists who came later, like Ilya Prigogine, gave this concept a formal name: dissipative structures. And these are these incredible, self-organizing patterns that just pop up seemingly out of nowhere, as long as there's a steady flow of energy moving through a system. The system literally dissipates energy in order to maintain its own structure. And once you know what to look for, you start seeing these things everywhere. They're in simple physics, like the cool patterns you see in a heated pan of oil, but they're also in the incredibly complex metabolic cycles that are keeping you alive right now, and even in the nutrient cycles of an entire ecosystem. So this is it. This is how the paradox gets solved. An organized system is basically like an anti-entropy machine. First, it absorbs useful stuff, energy and information. Then, its internal organization uses those inputs to maintain itself and do its thing. And, this is the crucial part, it exports its own internal disorder, its own mess, back out into the universe as waste and heat. It's this constant active process of pushing chaos away. But, and there's always a but, all this amazing work of creating and maintaining order, well, it doesn't come for free. There are real, fundamental physical costs and limits to how complex something can get. For a long time, physicists wondered if information, since it seems so abstract, could be a kind of loophole. Could you use it to cheat the system? This led to one of the most famous thought experiments in all of science, Maxwell's demon. The idea was pretty simple. Imagine a tiny little being, a demon, that could see individual molecules. It sits at a tiny door between two chambers, and it sorts the fast-moving hot molecules to one side and the slow-moving cold ones to the other. In doing this, it would create order from chaos, seemingly without doing any work, which should be impossible. Well, the verdict is in. Nope, can't be done. Physics always wins. We eventually discovered something called Landauer's principle, which proved that information is actually physical. The simple act of observing a molecule and then having to forget its position, the act of erasing information, has a real energy cost. It generates a tiny bit of heat, which increases the total entropy of the universe. So no free lunch.
There's also a limit to how much information a system can even handle effectively. If you have too little information, the system just becomes rigid and brittle. It can't adapt to anything new. But if you have way too much information, it gets completely overwhelmed, descends into chaos, and falls apart.
And this means that all successful, resilient systems, from a single cell all the way up to human societies, have to operate in this creative sweet spot, this state that's often called the edge of chaos. They need just enough order to hold themselves together, but also just enough flexibility to change and adapt.
And I want to be clear, this is not just some abstract theory. These are the exact principles at the heart of modern systems engineering. When we design our power grids, our communication networks, our financial markets, we are actively trying to solve these exact problems. We're trying to manage information, build in resilience, and find that perfect balance between order and adaptability.
And this brings us to one final, truly mind-bending thought, which the physicist John Wheeler summed up with the phrase, "it from bit." It's this radical idea that maybe, at the most fundamental level, physical reality, the it, actually emerges from information, from bits. So if order is just information taking on a physical shape, it forces us to ask a really deep question. Is our universe ultimately made of stuff, or is it made of information?